In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And we are back on a presumably happy, sunny day in December.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Gosh, I can't believe it's in December. I know that's so stupid to be like, time, blah, 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 but like, man, what a ride.
Yeah, do you feel like the older you're getting, the quicker it's happening?
I do, and I feel like every time I look at the calendar, I'm like, God, it's the same fucking stuff every year. Like I have to do Thanksgiving and I have to do Christmas, and then January starts and we're gonna do Girl Scout cookies, and then baseball starts, and then it's summer, and then I'm like, it's the same thing every year and it never ends.
We'll die soon enough, Taylor. It'll be fine.
Yes, everything is fine. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Doomed to Fail, with a podcast that brings you history's most notorious disasters and epic failures twice a week, every week. I am Taylor, joined by Fars. On Monday, we talked about Niagara Falls, and now it's Fars's turn to tell us the story.
It's Farz's turn. So, I'm going to do a slight continuation of medieval history by talking about the Tower of London.
Yay! Not a tower.
Well, I mean, it has towers.
Right.
But it's not itself a tower. Yes.
Yeah.
So one thing I found, one thing I was thinking about as I was doing this research is that there's so much history that's not there. Because people just didn't document shit. There was nobody could read, nobody could write. There was no place to put things. There's no libraries to put them in that would withstand the test of time. All these places that are of world historical significance got shelled into oblivion during World War I and II, or through the many conquests of mankind. And I mean, go ahead.
No, we talk about that, and I think that we're wrong to think. I've said this before, that our history is going to be forever.
Yeah, but no, I would never assume that.
Yeah.
I mean, think about even the stuff that right now we think is well documented is digitized in a way that I don't know, in 1,000 years there might not be any concept of computers. I mean, everything's just stored in brain waves. And
exactly. Yeah.
It's not reverse compatible the way that my PS5 games aren't reverse compatible with PS4.
Exactly.
Same thing. It's just like that.
Jeez.
So going into the history of the Tower of London. So let's start with London itself. I learned so much.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. You've not been to London. You've been to the airport, but you have not been there.
I've never been outside of the airports. Yeah.
I've been there twice. I stayed there for 2 weeks in grad school. It was so fun.
I'm sure I would love to go. I would love to go. It seems like a really fun city. So London's really interesting. There's so much infighting between groups, and groups are so poorly defined in this time that's one of my key takeaways. So so here's a brief, super abridged version of how London became London. So prior to 1066, Anglo-Saxons ruled the territory that is now known as London. And I never knew this, but Anglo-Saxons a whole breed of people.
What are you talking about? It was 1066. It was the Battle of Hastings. We know this.
I'm going to get into that. I'm going to talk about So prior to 10, that's what all this happened. So yes. So prior to 1066, Anglo-Saxons ruled the territory known as London. England as a whole was basically broken up between different factions, and Anglo-Saxons and Normans, or people with roots in Normandy, didn't get along. And that's kind of how London happened. So mostly this had to do with what I would argue are basically minor and inconsequential details that caused them to fight. It's so interesting. Any human who is slightly different than any other human will find a way to hate that human. It's just
1,000%.
ingrained in our DNA. We will never outrun this thing.
We just watched Independence Day 2, which was not terrible. It's kind of fun, but they were we had 20 years of peace. Which the only way we'd have that is if aliens came down and tried to kill everyone, and even then, I don't think we could do it.
Yeah, even then, we'd find a way to fight each other.
Yeah.
The distinctions I found between Anglo-Saxons and Normans was Anglo-Saxons, their roots were more in Germanic cultures. Normans were more in Viking cultures. Anglo-Saxons were pagans and Normans were Christians. Anglo-Saxons actually spoke Old English, whereas Normans spoke Old Norman, which is a precursor to modern French. It's just like, yeah, you're in different places. You're different. That's how it goes. Like that's
Yeah.
how we are as humans. And like they're
Stop
like,
trying to kill
kill
each
them,
other.
fucking just go after them and cut their heads off. It's like incredible.
Incredible.
So for these reasons, the Duke of Normandy, this guy named William the Conqueror, was roaming around England in 1066, jacking up Anglo-Saxons and asserting his authority. So, as you asserted, in November of 1066, he made his way into London after winning the Battle of Hastings, which was the one big battle between Normans and Anglo-Saxons, or the Anglo-Saxon king at the time, and that kind of set the stage for everything that comes after this.
That is Doomed to Fail episode 39 was the Battle of Hastings.
There you go. Did you go into what happened after the formation of London?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. Then we call us part two of that one. So by the time he ended up getting to London, this poor kid, some teenage kid king named Edgar was crowned. Poor Edgar. And,
I
and
can't
like
wait.
at this point, the Anglo-Saxon army is completely decimated. So from what I can gather, William the Conqueror just kind of marched on into London, and this poor kid they put in charge just told him he can have it, which makes
Yeah,
sense.
I wouldn't fight. I'd be like, you're good.
Take it, dude.
Let me leave with my wife.
Skin.
Yeah.
So William the Conqueror, he is coordinated as king in December of 1066. Shortly thereafter, he did basically what kings do, and he decided to build like a super impressive castle for himself. He started building the White Tower, which was built right on the River Thames. Thames,
Thames.
Thames,
Thames.
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 It was meant to be his residence as well as fortification from potential invaders. It was not an impressive building by modern standards. It was about 50,000 square feet across four levels. It had a basement, which was for storage and dungeon spaces, a main floor, which was the residence, the upper floor, which was the living quarters, and the top floor was used by guards. It was pretty chill. Like it wasn't like a blow your socks off kind of place.
Hmm.
For about 200 years, it would maintain its use as a royal residence and mostly maintain its appearance and structure. But over time, new rulers would take it over and make additions or changes. Most of these changes were in keeping with shifting away from it being a royal residence and it being used more for matters of state. And the construction going on outside of it would reflect this. Nearly 300 or so years after it was built, monarchs would build the Westminster Palace, Windsor Castle, and Hampton Court Palace, and they would use those as their primary residences. Again, at this point, it would become more of a ceremonial place to take, heads of state for things. When it was first built, the grounds for the White Tower was about 1 acre. Tiny, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
200 years later, it's up to 6 acres. A stone wall was put up and stone towers were constructed for better observation of the River Thames. 100 years later, the grounds increased by double to 12 acres. A moat was added, and the outer wall was expanded. A chapel was built, and a fun little gateway was put in called the Trader's Gate, which was installed for prisoners being brought in from the river.
Like traitor, like not Trader Joe's traitor, like you betrayed me.
You betrayed me. Yeah. Yeah. They took that kind of traitor stuff pretty seriously in Old England.
Yeah. And so they needed the executioners.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Which we're going to get into actually. So in the 14th century, more towers were constructed with such socially acceptable names as Bloody Tower,
Love it.
um, barracks, armories, and the residences for high profile prisoners were also added. And in the 16th century is when all pretense that this thing had been used for anything other than creating misery for the local population was dropped, and basically became a prison along with like some other state functions. Like it was the mint, for example. Like it did stuff like that.
Hmm.
By this point, it had expanded from the original 1 acre I mentioned earlier as the White Tower to 18 acres into what is now known as the Tower of London. So, and it's not like what you were saying earlier. Like it's not a tower; it's a complex.
Right. At first, when you think of a tower, I think of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which is like actually a tower, you know?
Yeah, no, this is like this. This is like remember when in Game of Thrones, Reek went to his like uncle and said, "You should just give up for Ramsay or whatever and just quit, and he'll let you guys be fine." And then he let them in, and then they like killed them and skinned them.
Sure.
This is what that whole vibe is.
Mm-hmm.
Not good. So between 1540 and 1640, that was like the most active period for when it was a prison. The living experience of prisoners here like varied quite dramatically depending on who the prisoner was and what they were charged of. So high status inmates who were royalty of some kind, they were kept in like nice quarters. They would have like private quarters. They would have servants a lot of times. They were able to purchase their own food and stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
they had like a pretty chill life by most standards. Um, but then some people were kept in what we would picture as like a medieval prison, like damp, cold, dark, filled with rats and disease. There was an area in the basement that was known as Little Ease, which was filled with these 4 square foot rooms for prisoners where they would be kept in solitary confinement, and you wouldn't be able to sleep or sit in these rooms that were so small. It sounds
Ooh,
horrible.
that sounds
Yeah.
terrible.
The
Yeah.
Nazis did this too. I remember hearing that some of the camps had this in there too.
Remember in like the first or second Game of Thrones where Peter Dinklage is in that thing where he's like in the cell, but it's like outside and it's like turned, and he's like if he falls asleep, he'll roll into a lake.
No.
It's like very scary.
Yeah, they found really creative ways to torture people.
Yeah.
So it seems like to me that the flip from Catholicism to Protestant played a pretty heavy use in torture and misery being escalated at the Tower of London. Because a lot of the people, well, there's a lot of famous people that ended up there and being tortured and killed, but a lot of people seem like they just like weren't accepting of the Protestant faith, and that was
Hmm.
why they were there. They were like heretics, and they were like still Catholics. And again, it's like, dude, you're not that different. Like, just get along with them. Like, it's
I
fine.
know. Well, I just confirmed, but Anne Boleyn was killed there.
I know. I'm gonna get into it,
Okay, cool.
which you got into, which I'm gonna reference your episode as well.
God, this is so exciting for us.
Yeah, it all comes full circle.
Hmm.
So the rack was a popular device used for torture. That's basically a thing where you lay on your back and then they strap things to your arms and legs and just kind of pull you apart and disjoint your body.
Hmm.
There's another fun one called the Scavenger's Daughter. Yeah. So this was
I don't
a
know what that means, but I'm nervous.
So this was a metal A-frame looking contraption that they would put your neck in on the top part of it, like the peak of the A, for example. They would put your hands in the middle section, your feet in the bottom section. There'd be like a corkscrew looking thing at the end of it, and they would just twist this to basically do the opposite of a rack and compress your body into itself. Apparently, it was supposed to be really, really bad, especially after your muscles, joints, and everything else was torn to shreds. Doing this was particularly painful. So yeah, and then obviously like
Yikes.
all the rest of it, the beheadings, hangings, all we cover this in the executioner episode. Go listen to that one. But like, yeah,
Hmm.
they did a lot of horrible stuff here. Obviously, the locals hated the Tower of London. It had this foreboding quality to it, and originally it was a symbol of royal excess compared to the lives of daily Londoners, which
Hmm.
was horrible. Like living in London in like the medieval era, you went through the Black Death, you went through like
Yeah.
just everything was hard and horrible. And every now and then, which was kind of interesting, as they would expand it, they would also take over parts of the neighborhood that were useful for people, and they would just destroy it and take it for themselves. So that wasn't
Tale as old
fun,
as time. Yeah.
right? So it's this part's interesting. So throughout its history, only 22 people were ever executed at the Tower of London.
Hmm.
But that's because most executions needed to happen in public. So the public was terrified of the crown.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So a section outside of the tower grounds was known as Tower Hill. There's at least 120 executions that happened here, but that's just what was documented. And again, a lot of this stuff wasn't well documented. The state didn't want, they wanted you to see it, but they didn't want to have a historical record of what they did. They just wanted you to be
Hmm.
terrified of them.
Hmm.
So, given his reputation, I can only assume that there was a lot more than 120 executions that happened here. But well, that's what the record currently
Right,
shows.
and I'm sure people like died in the freaking vault or
Yeah,
whatever, you know?
yeah. Well, yeah, which we'll get into.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of this just wasn't documented. Which like a really high profile one is one that I'll go into here in a second. Over time, the Tower of London became mostly ceremonial and served as a headquarters for the British military. they would still hold prisoners there, but it became less common and mostly reserved for high-profile criminals. The last prisoner of state, this is absolutely incredible. If you've been ignoring me this whole time, pay attention to this, people. Like turn the audio up. The last prisoner of the state to be held here was Rudolph Hess.
Whoa.
Rudolph Hess was deputy to Adolf Hitler.
Whoa.
And towards like the when the World War II started heating up, he basically got isolated from the decision making process. It was like, okay, Rudolph, you're over there. Like, yes, you have duties and whatever, but like we don't need you for military stuff. This is insane side story, but there was some intermediaries between Rudolph Hess and the King of England. There was like Duke, whatever, of who gives a shit, right? So he Hess heard that through his intermediaries that the King of England, King George, wanted to remove Churchill from his role in favor of conceding the war to Hitler. That's what he
Mm-hmm.
heard.
Mm-hmm.
Hess then wrote a letter to some random duke that this intermediary knew and told him that he wrote a letter to the king, handed it off to this duke saying, "Hey, I plan to fly to England and negotiate a peace with you
Can't believe he did this.
without
This is
telling
just
Hitler." This is
wild.
real history that
I
actually
know.
happened.
I know.
So this guy trained himself how to fly a fighter jet or fighter plane and flew from Germany to meet this duke in Scotland so he can start the peace negotiations with King George of England. So the best part of this is that after he took off, he had his underlings deliver a letter describing his plan to Hitler. And Hitler just like when you read this account of this, you can hear him like slapping his forehead, being like, "Oh my god, what an idiot!" It's like what a fucking idiot. He spread news to the media that Hess was insane and experiencing a nervous breakdown, and told his staff to shoot him on sight if he ever comes back.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill, after the fact, this is amazing. After the fact, he would describe Hess's plan as one of quote lunatic benevolence unquote. Like he sounded almost shocked that anyone in a position that Hess had attained in life would ever think that this plan would work. Like he was basically describing. I wrote down. It sounded like Churchill was describing him as like a golden retriever trying to like get in between two grizzly bears fighting over salmon. It was like, dude, this is not gonna work.
But I feel like we talked about this before because I'm looking up pictures of Rudolph Hess, and I know I've recently looked at the picture of him as an old man, and I was like, I can't believe he got to be an old man. You
Yeah,
know?
93. 93.
What?
So what happened? Here's what happened. This is all true. Hess boarded this jet, this plane. He flew into Scotland and then he started running low on fumes and he ejected from his plane. The plane crash landed. He was fiddling around with his parachute when some farmer just saw him, was like, "What are you saying? What language is this?" And took him back to his cottage and then phoned the police. From there, the police reached out to the military and then everybody descended on this cottage and
What was he wearing?
I don't know actually. I wish I knew. It'd be so funny if he was wearing his SS uniform.
I feel like he probably was.
So from there he meets with all these officials in the military and he starts telling them that listen, I have a plan to negotiate a peace treaty. You got to let Hitler have Europe and then I think we'll be good. And they're like, no, you're not gonna do this. It's incredible. He,
No, that's literally the thing that we're fighting for.
well, he was like, listen, he'll let you keep England, just give him the rest of Europe, and then you'll be fine. And they're like, we're not doing that. So
No.
eventually he was transferred to the Tower of London for a few days before going to a different prison and staying there until the Nuremberg trials, where he was given a life sentence. Ultimately, he would die in some other prison at 93 years old by suicide in 1987. Some say it wasn't suicide. Most prevailing historians say it was suicide. Doesn't really matter. What's interesting is that the last execution of the Tower of London in the 1940s was also a German, a guy named Joseph Jacobs, who again flew from Germany into Allied territory, parachuted out, broke his ankles in the process, and was immediately discovered. His sentence was fast. There was like he had no strategic value whatsoever. They just like took him in the
Right, he
back
was
and
like a
shot him in the
guy.
head. Yeah, they're
Oh,
like
God.
just kill him on sight. So that's what. Well, they didn't kill him on site. They killed him at the Tower of London, by firing squad. So other famous deaths worth calling out here, as you mentioned, our fifth episode, Taylor, you covered Anne Boleyn. So she was obviously killed here, as well as Guy Fawkes, who tried to lead a revolt against the king and was sentenced to drawing and quartering. What's interesting here is that he actually never got to the end part of his execution because during the hanging part, after they put the rope around his neck, he actually jumped, breaking his neck because he was like, I don't want the rest of this. Just kill me fast. And so he did that.
Ooh.
Then there's the story of the princes in the tower, not the princess in the tower. It's the princes, two males
Two
in
princes.
the tower. Yes. And that's like a really famous English story, which like I wasn't aware of. Did you know about this?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Tell me more.
So it's relatively quick synopsis, but these are the two sons. The princes are two sons, Edward V, age 12, and Richard, age 9, whose father was King Edward IV and died in 1483. So in theory, Edward V was to be king, but given the fact that he was 12 years old at the time, his uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was named the Lord Protector. So plans for Edward's coronation were underway while Edward stayed at the Tower of London, which was what you did. The monarch would, during this time in the 1400s, the monarch stays in the Tower of London in the residence that are waiting for their coronation. About a month later, while planning was still underway for this coronation, his brother Richard also joined him at the Tower, and the uncle decided after this to postpone the coronation. It sounds like the uncle was doing like stuff behind the scenes because it was around this time that Parliament passed a law called Titulus Regius, which stated that Edward's claim to the throne was illegitimate because his father, Edward IV, the previous king, had pre-contracted to marry a different woman, which, based on whatever interpretation this is, means that the new king was illegitimate and a bastard, so he couldn't be the king. So they literally passed a law to skip the rightful king, this 12-year-old little boy, so that it could go to his uncle. So that laid the groundwork for his uncle to ascend to the throne, and then the two brothers were never seen again. Never seen again. Again, like this is not a death that's counted as an execution, but like that was it.
I feel like it is like even recently they found evidence of them or something. Like it's still a mystery. Is that true?
Yeah, so it's still a mystery. They did find bones consistent with a 12 and a 9-year-old deep in the grounds in the Tower of London. But what they said was whatever it is, like the strata of earth they found them in was in line with the era in which the Romans ran London. And so they're like, they would never have been buried that deep, probably. So we probably just found these kids that were here when the Romans ruled London, and they died, and their bones are here.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was some talk of other bones being found, like in 2012 or something, and DNA testing being done on them. I don't know if it never happened. Well, I don't know if that happened, but I know that we still don't know where their bodies are.
Yeah.
So today, the Tower of London is the most popular tourist attraction in England, actually, and it houses the crown jewels. It serves as a historic site. Say again.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because I'm pretty sure I saw the crown jewels there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and you might have seen the ravens there, which is pretty fun. So apparently,
and the beefeaters.
The beefeaters, exactly. So the superstition in England is that, quote, if the Tower of London ravens are lost or fly away, the crown will fall and Britain with it. That's the quote. And so now, at minimum, they keep 6 ravens at the Tower of London. There's actually a Raven Master, which is like the most metal job in the world.
Can you imagine? It's 2024 and you're the Raven Master of the Tower of London.
Get
the fuck out of here with that job.
If you showed up at a bar and you turn to the girl next to you and you're like, what do you do for work? It's like, I'm a venture capitalist. And it's like, what do you do? It's like, I'm the Raven Master. It's like, dude, you're done. Like you don't even have to open your mouth.
I feel like also you would know because he'd be wearing like a black cloak.
I know. He's like carrying a raven on his shoulder.
I'm the Raven Master. Oh no, I see that. I
kind of picked it up with a raven on your shoulder. So currently there are seven ravens. They're named Jubilee, Harris, Poppy, Georgie, Edgar, Bronwyn, and Rex. And Rex
Huh,
was the most recent one, and they added that when King Charles was coronated.
great.
So thank you, ravens, for preserving a very, very useful monarchy that
Yeah, I guess.
we all love to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Done great things for the world.
Sure.
So that's my story. That's the Tower of London.
That's cool. I definitely, when I was there, you could ice skate there. I didn't ice skate there, but I remember that there was ice skating there, and I was like, that is hilarious.
Yeah, it's a
Let me see
weird
if I
thing
pictures of me
knowing
there.
what misery existed there, but
Yeah. Tell me, do you know more about the beef eaters? So they wear those big hats, and like, why
so
is that their job?
they're yeomans. They are there's some crazy title. We just call them beef eaters because the title is like the yeoman warrior to her crown majesty. It's like something crazy. They just like we're like just call them beef eaters. But
So weird.
technically, I think it's actually mostly a ceremonial job. I think it's like sort of their security guards at the Tower of London. It's
Hmm.
just like another thing that they spend money on where it's like just do something different with this money.
Yeah. I guess they like stand there. So what do I want? I want September. Ooh, September. Oh no,
Stand there.
January
Yeah, they do a lot of
2007.
standing there.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but that's fun. It's
Yeah.
crazy that you can like go on a tour to a place that was like that, like stuff like that happened.
Yeah, I thought that too when I was in Ireland and walking around and being like, I'm walking inside like a 1600-year-old ruins of like a castle. It's just otherworldly. Like
Yeah, like where people were like terrified and murdered and died, and it's so weird.
it's just like our concept of time as Americans is like
Yeah,
nuts because
yeah,
how old is America? 270?
yeah. And there's
Like
just like
there's bars in England older than 270.
exactly. That's so funny. There's so much more. Well, luckily we're not going to run out of ideas because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, like that's what I was thinking with during your episode. It's kind of interconnected and
Hmm.
it just goes so many layers deep because like realistically, I could have done an entire episode on the Bloody Tower. They call the Bloody Tower that's where the two princes were held. Like you could do an
Yeah.
entire episode just on that part of the structure. Like there's just so
Hmm.
much to all this stuff,
Hmm.
which is why I also think a lot of it wasn't really documented. It was just like it was like kind of how deep do you go?
Or like
Right.
it was and it was like destroyed, like you
Or is
said. Or
destroyed. But
like,
like
yeah.
finding out like what the foundation of the Tower of London was made out of, when it was poured or laid or whatever, like that stuff doesn't exist. Like there would like
Well, like you say,
there's
it like goes back to the when the Romans were there, and then like the Romans just like abandoned England, and then whole bunch of stuff happened, and then
yeah.
it's yeah, so much stuff.
Yeah, even like the whole taking over of London, it was literally just like this guy just went around burning the shit out of everything and the
Hmm.
Anglo-Saxons were like, "Oh, we're done here." And this kid being like, "I don't want to fight you anymore. I think I'm good. Let me go play
Yeah,
with my
I mean,
Legos."
we just talked about with Jack the Ripper how hard it was to live in London then, you know,
Yeah.
and that was like hundreds of years after this, you know.
Life was so hard. Humans are
Let's
so
go to
resilient.
London. I know.
I'd be into it.
I'll go underground in London.
Is there an underground in London?
I have no idea. Remember our idea for the podcast Underground with Taylor and Farce? And you go to caves and I go underneath cities and we see who dies first.
I think I'll die first. I don't have
I
the
guess it means
body
you win. You
composition.
win if you die first.
Oh, okay, yeah, then I'll win. I don't have the body composition to get through a cave really well, so I don't think it's gonna go too good for me. But yeah, that's my
That'll be fun.
story and a little jaunt down to medieval times.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
Very fun. Makes me want to go back to London.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's like, I mean, listen, if there was ever a day when I could like just kind of semi-retire, I think I would just do that. I would just throw
Hmm.
my luggage over my back and just go around England
Yeah.
or the UK.
Especially if you like have enough money to stay at hotels. Like I'm not gonna backpack anywhere, but if I like have enough money to stay at hotels, then that is good. I'm
That's
too old for
true.
that,
That's
obviously.
true. I,
Yeah.
I I've aged out of sharing bathrooms. Let's put it that
Oh,
way.
1000%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely not. Um, Cool. Well, thank you. That was very, very fun.
Yay.
Yay.
Do we have anything to read off?
No, but I did want to mention that I did not send out our newsletter in October because I usually send it at the beginning of the month, and the beginning of November was too much. Just too much was going on. But I will send it out soon. So if you are not signed up for a newsletter and you want to get reminders of our episodes, we are on Substack at Doomed to Fail Pod. We're on one of the million places that you can find us on the internet. But you can sign up for a newsletter there.
Sweet.
And the link
Thank
is in
you.
our link tree on our Instagram. I don't know.
Beautiful.
I
And
kid
find us
everyone.
on doomtofailpod@gmail.com or write to us
Send us a
doomtofailpod@gmail.com.
note. What do
Send
you
us a
want to learn
note.
about? What's like a cool thing that you heard and you're like, I wish I knew more, or you know a lot about it and you want us to know about it too?
You
Tell
know what's
us.
funny is I literally came up with an idea for a topic while we were talking or while you were doing your episode. Should I tell you?
No.
Well, I might not do it though.
Okay, tell me.
Wait, what was his name again?
No, don't tell me.
I can't okay, so I'm trying to find my my search history. It was the you were talking about like the people going over Niagara Falls,
Hmm.
and I was like, man, like God bless these like legends of mankind who do the stupidest possible things. And then I remember that guy who was like a limo driver in Las Vegas who wanted to prove that the earth was flat. So he built like a homemade rocket and fired himself into space. And it like actually worked. Like he actually went far enough to be able to see the curvature of the earth. And like I was like, wait, like I need to figure out like what that guy's background and history was. Like he taught himself rocket science and he doesn't believe the earth is round. Like it's
It's so funny.
that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like
that is incredill.
it's like not believing
What
in
a hill to
gravity.
die on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who cares?
He did die though. I did see he died like 4 years ago. He blew himself up some other way. I can't remember
I think
what.
he did too. I think he like went like 20 feet and then fell or something.
Yeah, but there was one that was actually successful. He actually did get far enough. But anyways, I might make that next week's topic. But it was just like I was like thinking about like other crazy people, and like that came
Yeah,
to mind.
I love it. That's so funny.
Anyways, cool, Taylor.
Cool.
That's all I got.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Ta-ra.